It is a pleasant evening, Lagos. It is 16 minutes done to 5, and you are tuned into the marketplace here on Smooth 98.1. My name is Joy Ray, and a marketplace today. We'll be talking about two-man business stories from Nigeria to start this new week and the month. We'll touch on oil and economic growth. Well, we've been seeing what's been happening so far in Iran and all that, and how it's affecting the world generally. Brent crude touched $82 per barrel earlier today, once the market reacted to the US and Israel missile strikes on Iran. So those gains have come down to about $72 per barrel. So we'll be talking about that, what the pros and cons could be for Nigeria. Also, we'll also touch on the National Bureau of Statistics that released, well, that was the statistics that was released on Friday regarding the GDP growth for Nigeria in the fourth quarter of that is 2025. And it came to 4.07%, while the full year of 2025 came about to 3.87%. You may be wondering, that there's a decline. What happened? Well, my guest will be shedding light on both of those interesting highlights today. And my guest joining me this evening is Osamagbe Enofe. He is a research analyst at Alpha10 Fund Management Limited. Good evening, Osa. I'm glad to have you with me.
Hi, good evening, Joy. It's nice to be here this evening.
Awesome. As always, Lagos, you're also part of the conversation. You're not left out. To share your questions, your thoughts as well, you share it with us on WhatsApp 0911 999 Love to get your contributions in and get a high insight into what your thoughts are, especially where crude oil is concerned. A lot of people have been speculating, but thank God we have a guest that can break that down. So let's get in with the growth that we've seen. With 4% economic growth in the last 3 months of 2025, that's the end of the fourth quarter, right? How would you describe Nigeria's economy? Because certain people will say it was stable, some will say it was still recovering. So where do we stand? Which applies best when we're talking about our economy?
Okay, looking at the GDP data that was released, using that to judge and the past data for maybe to Q3 and even 2024, 3 point something rate. So it's not to say like the economy is we say is a stable one at the moment. Probably recovering from all the macroeconomic headwinds and that we've had in the past, and so seeing the new macroeconomic policies that is being enacted both federal by the federal government and the CBN taking shape. So we'd say that the economy isn't like it's not expanding, so to say, it's not expanding largely, but it's just a stable economy at this moment, and it's just consistent, right? Quarter on quarter, we are seeing, I think the previous one was 3.98, now we are seeing 4.07. So this like there's a consistent pattern. The deviation is not the increase or the decrease that we've seen in from Q1 to Q4 2025 wasn't that much. We're still in
Okay.
the 3 point something to 4 point something rate. So that's for me is a stable economy, knowing that we are still recovering from all the past trauma that our economy has actually faced. And then we are seeing a lot of rebound in sectors. Some sectors are doing well, picking up, where we are seeing the services sector for one actually doing a whole lot, where we see that telecoms is actually doing great, contributing greatly to GDP. We see that even financial sectors actually contributing greatly to the GDP. So we see that it's a stable and recovering economy for me. I would say that.
Okay, that also would take stable and recovering, and that is where we are. And I'm glad to hear that it's not that we're in the doldrums, so it's not something we need to worry pretty head with so much. At least
Yeah.
this is the early days. Before we get more headway, we'll get to the end of third quarter and then start thinking about that in the first quarter of the first month of the second quarter, more or less. Okay, let me not bamboozle you and start confusing you. So let's get it. Let's continue the conversation here. But one thing I'd like to know is oil sector. Let's touch on that. What would you what did you make of the 6.79% growth in the oil sector in the fourth quarter?
Okay, recording a 6.79% in oil sector is actually, for me, I would say is a good one. Looking
Okay.
at what happened in the oil sector last year, right? So the price of oil went down in the market, and we could not actually, Nigeria, especially in Q4, we could not actually ramp up our production levels. We were able to do 1.58 million barrel per day as against Q3 where we did 1.64 million barrel per day. So you see that the margin we were able to produce in Q4 was actually lower than what we did in Q3. So that would also affect the revenue, so the revenue stream from oil sector, right? But seeing that we are able to do that is actually it's actually a slightly better outcome than expected for me. I think during the quarter Q4 2025, we saw oil going back up. So I think that's sort of like it's the oil sector in that regard. So for me, I would say it's good. It wasn't that great. It's still the sector is still fragile because
Okay.
yes, they see a lot that needs to be done for us to ramp up our production levels, right? So, but yeah, what we got last year was in Q4 2025 was not bad at all.
Okay, so we wait for the new markup and see what it is we've done so far, if it's still something that is on the uprise or uh if it's something that hey, it's just stagnant.
Yeah.
All that we'll see very soon. Get insight into all that very soon. Now, the non-oil sector grew by 3.8% in the fourth quarter of 2024, and then it grew. Then in the third quarter of 2025, it was 3.91%.
Yeah.
However, in the fourth quarter as well of 2024, it went down to 3.99%. What would you make of the non-oil growth sector? What the numbers just fluctuating here and there?
Okay. Like I said, if you look at the numbers carefully, you discover that they're almost on the same range. So there's not a
Mm-hmm.
monumental leap or a monumental decline in what we are recording so far, right? Which is why I said I'll place it on a stable and recovering economy, right? So,
Okay.
but looking at the non-oil sector in 2024, Q4 2024, comparing the same quarter the same
Mm-hmm.
quarter at Q4 2024, we saw the non-oil sector doing 3.8%, right? And then in 2025, we saw it doing 3.99%. The difference was not very much. But one thing you'd like to note from the report that was dropped by National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, you see that non-oil sector was able to account for over 97% of our GDP. So even in a
Right.
country that is largely driven by oil, you see that oil is not at the main front of our GDP at the moment. We have what's it called? We have the agricultural sector ramping up. We have services, like I mentioned, ramping up. Then we
Mm-hmm.
talk about telecoms, we talk about financial services, they're ramping up. Even manufacturing, although not as largely as we'd expect manufacturing to be, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, there was also a ramp up in that regard. And we look at even transportation. There was a lot of boom in most sectors, and so the non-oil sector performing above 97% is actually a good one.
Okay. Do you have any contributions, Lagos, you'd like to share? Your observations. WhatsApp is the platform to do that. 0911 999 0981. We're touching a bit on the quarters, last quarter, that's the fourth quarter of 2025, and seeing how we've done so far, if we grew, if we're stagnant, and then also touching on, it's not just the oil sector, we're also seeing the growth and how the statistics of National Bureau of Statistics have brought it out, seeing what it is we've done so far and evaluating it. So if you have your contributions, now will be the time to share your questions or your contributions. And talking about contributions, let's get into the mining sector. I know that this has been purported that it's something we need to invest more in. And I know that
Yeah.
the mining and quarry sector grew by 8.9% in the fourth quarter of 2025. How encouraging is this? Seeing where it could be having with speculation, allegedly, it's been said that certain people are tapping into this. The Nigerian, uh, as a whole, or Nigerians
Mm,
are not benefiting enough from it. So
mm,
I'd
mm.
like you to expand on that.
Okay, if you look at the mining, the quarry sector, I think oil, even oil falls under that sector too, to say, right? So, it's actually a very small slice of the cake, right? That makes up our GDP at the moment. So it's
Okay.
I think a lot of focus needs to go into those sectors, not just only on oil, right? So we have a lot of
Mm,
natural resources that still needs to mine and probably contribute to our exports and contribute in great sense to our GDP, right? So, but last year, I think we saw a lot of even down to the NGX, right? We saw some mining stocks doing well, going
okay.
like some mining stocks doing well in the market in NGX, right? So I think
Mm,
there's focus now coming into those sectors, and so but we need to. I think a lot of structure still needs to be done in that sector so it can actually be able to stand. So we know that there are a lot of fraudulent activities in most of those sectors, so we need to be able to combat that. But last year, I think one of the factors that played a major role in that sector was the contributions from oil, right? So, and I think that actually made the what you call it, make that sector actually come out well and look good, right? But there's still lots of
to
investment, there's still a lot of how do I say it's not development that needs to go into that sector so we can actually have better outputs and contribution to our GDP.
Hmm, I agree with you. We need to actually push that so we can get more, well, not just the money, but we can see how that sector can actually grow properly. But one thing I'd also like to focus on is the agricultural sector. And I know that agriculture posted a 4% growth. What triggers can we point to this if we actually saying that there's been growth? Certain people wouldn't agree completely because well, you've had issues. We've had the farmers not being able to actually go to the farms, but so far so good. At least this first quarter of 2026, we've been seeing produce. But I would like you to talk in this.
Okay, I think this is one of the sector, one of the part of those GDP that directly can translate to individuals out there because we see all of these products, farm produce outside, right? So if I want to be honest and candid, right, from my own perspective, last year was we had a good harvest last year for me,
Mm,
because we saw
okay.
that the price of food stuff went down, right? Um,
It wasn't
it became
astronomical.
yes, it wasn't astronomical as before, right? So the price were almost bearable. Some persons were even shocked and surprised to see that even in December you could get commodity, you could get farm produce that cheap, right? So we are expecting prices to be inflated in December, but we didn't see much of that happening, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but down to the agricultural sector, we're seeing that crop production was actually increased because we see that I think it's made up to about 65% of the agricultural sector in the GDP that was released. So farm production was actually crop production was actually top notch. Harvest patterns was actually I wouldn't say there were some disruptions, right? But it was
Okay.
not. it was not very material to actually offscale things or set things out of the balance, right? So, and then we also saw logistics stress was actually eased because we see that compared to previous years, the prices of fuel and diesel was
Moving
actually
right,
actually
especially
moving
during
down.
the December period, it's usually
Yes,
skyrockets, but for the
yes.
first time in a long time, it was
We
stable.
experienced stability. So it was actually, I think that was what set the ground for most of the changes that we saw in the farm produce in the agricultural sector that last year. And so it's actually affected and contributed to the GDP and to the Q4 GDP. Yes.
Nice. I'm actually excited to hear that. Well, we'll see how things are panning out so far. I'm not going to digress. I was going to talk about Dangote, but that's another conversation for another day. All right. Now let's talk about manufacturing. This sector seems to be struggling, though. They only had about 1% growth. What are the obvious challenges that they're having to deal with?
Mm. Okay. The manufacturing sector has a whole lot of or
Teething
challenges that they're
problems?
dealing with. Yes. Would say
Okay.
because a lot of things really affects it, right? We see also FX cost affects manufacturing, also energy costs, because most of these companies
Mm,
they've resorted to providing electricity or providing energy for their operations themselves, and so this will definitely feed into the cost of production, right? And inflation, even though we are seeing inflation accelerating, inflation is still high compared to other worlds, other countries, and even African countries. We're seeing some African countries like Kenya
mm.
having an inflation of 4 point something percent, but ours is still in the double digit region. So we are seeing 15 points, our inflation right now is at 15.10%. So for me, it's
Wow.
still, for most
It's so
analysts, or
high.
it's still high when you compare it to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of others, right? So,
Right.
and then also, I think because of the high cost of production that goes into manufacturing in sector in Nigeria, we are seeing high output in prices, and so these are actually reduced interest from the consumers. So there's no really appetite to purchase most of these things that are manufactured in Nigeria because we feel they're too expensive and stuff like that. So the weak consumer demand has also affected the that sector, and so we see that manufacturers are now trying to squeeze themselves so that they have little margins to post as profits. Do you understand? So that they make their goods easily affordable for consumers, while they make little or no profits, right? So they make little or no profit, and so this not making profit will definitely feed into
It'll
what the
affect.
GDP would produce. So I think that's what is happening. And also the producers, the cost of getting raw materials to produce is actually still high for most sectors in the manufacturing space, right? So
Sector.
yeah, getting what's it called raw materials is still it's hard and difficult and expensive for most manufacturers, and so that's also feeding into what we see there.
Ooh, just
Is
thinking
it not?
about it now. Honestly, it's a lot. It's not teething problems. These are real major issues, and
Yeah.
hopefully, well, especially when you have to source materials for your business from abroad,
Yeah,
you're
some
thinking
have
about
to
the
import these
FX.
things.
Right.
Even machineries that needs to be used for these productions. Most of them are imported and they have high cost. Even some manufacturers even go as far as to import, let's say import engineers for when these machines are faulty. And so those are very, very, very high cost to the manufacturers. And so that's just always seen correctly.
No. Let's move away from the manufacturing sector, which I hope we eventually find a solution to. But let's talk about telecoms. Ah. Well, as we know, telco is a subset of information, communication, technology, all that other
Mm.
busy sector, and it grew by 8.39%.
39%. Mm.
Honestly, that is an impressive growth.
Massive.
I've been following the market for at least I've been seeing a particular brand I'm not going to mention,
Yeah,
but if you know the
yeah,
color
yeah.
yellow, you can make
Mm.
do with that. Yeah, I've been seeing the growth so far, and it's been impressive. But how
Yeah.
would you assess that sector? What would you say to that sector?
So I just want to ask you personally, Joy, how much do you spend on data on a monthly
My
basis? Or how
days.
much have you spent in data for the last year? Or
Bro,
Q4
let's
2025?
not
Can you account for that? So
let's
this
not
and
let's not
you
get into that, please. Before they will come for my neck. Like, so that's how
you
much you're
see
spending on data?
data. So, and it's seeming
Oh
like
my
we
word.
can't live, we live and we breathe data now in this
True,
country.
true.
And so talking about the color yellow that you mentioned about, I think they were in the news last week. They posted
Right.
over a trillion naira in revenue for last week. So imagine
Mm-hmm.
over a trillion naira coming into the GDP, factoring into what we have as GDP. That's massive, really. That's a game changer, I think. So yeah, looking at that, Nigeria has become data driven, right? So we have almost the average Nigerian youth is a content maker, a skit maker, or or, or
I
we
agree.
are an avid user of the internet, right? So and this has actually contributed to that regard, right? So digital payment also using digital, not just looking at
Oh
telecoms now,
yes.
using digital payment. Fintech sector has been, I think for the last, let me just say the last decade or last 5 years has been on an uprise, right? So we have been having, even when we started, when the whole cashless policy started
Came
taking
out.
place, we also were transitioning to the digital usage of transferring money and all of that. We see that has actually skyrocketed, and so we are seeing businesses. It has created a whole new sort of businesses for some persons, right? So, and this all of these has actually fed into what we see in that sector turning up at the moment, right? So, and then if this goes with that saying that we still need a lot of infrastructural development in that sector. So, because I think I still think we are paying too much for internet usage, data, and all this, even
Oh.
transfer charges and all of that. It's still high. Yes, that's the truth. It's still high. So I still
Compared
think
to
there's
other and I'm not going to the other clans. I'm talking about within Africa. It's still high.
yes, to some extent it's still a bit high, right? So there
Hmm.
still needs to be a lot of infrastructural development, there, structure, so that it would actually be cost friendly and not a burden for the average Nigerian, right?
Okay. All right. I didn't see it in that light, but now that you bring that up, huh, I will do my research. So I
I
know
think
that
I think we
go
had
go ahead.
sorry to cut you short. I think we had there was one comedian the other day who was outside the country and actually who was, I think I can't remember the name, but he actually did this also. It was sort of like was it a skit or sort of like
Okay.
orienting that what he buys when he buys a particular amount of data when he's outside the country, he uses it for up to that maybe a month or a year that he bought the data for and data is still there. But when he buys the same thing in Nigeria, it
It's
doesn't
like
get up to
you're sucking with a
yes,
straw, like,
yes, yes, yes. So I think
and I
there's still a
wonder.
lot of infrastructural development still needs to go to,
Ah,
and checkmates then to be checkmates in place for all these, right? So that's
right.
just my own opinion.
Now that's worrying. Oh my! Even when we think we're trying to be cautious, how much it is, we're born, so it's still too high.
Stay high, stay
Well,
high.
hopefully, some assessment will be done in that sector. Now let's talk about the full-on growth in the year. It was said to
Mm,
be 3.87% for
seven.
the full year for 2025. Um, do you see us coasting to 4% this year, or even higher?
4%. We grew from 3.38% of our overall in 2024, right, to
Mhm.
3.87%. So I think the margin for growth, if you want to use that, let's say the deviation was about 0.5, right? Deviation
Mm-hmm.
was about 0.5 or 0.4 something. So if we can add that back to what we already have at 3.87, this just paraphrasing or just doing a little bit of analysis, we can get to 4 point something.
Right.
So for me, I think we'll definitely be able to do maybe 4.1 to maybe 4.5, not to be, or 4.2. So we can do it 4.1 to maybe 4.2, 4.3. So that's what I see. And I think most of the sectors that will ramp up again, we will see agricultural sector. I still think, even though we are seeing the prices of agricultural produce has gone down, I still think it can go down more, right? So then maybe the finance sector and the services generally, ICT and
Mm-hmm.
telecommunications. I think those sectors will actually still do well in this uh, Q1 2026. You can see that. And then, yeah, if you follow in the NGS, you can see that most of these companies that are in this sector are just actually already doing well. So we can translate
Right.
that to see that we can get positive results when 2026 ends. Yeah.
Okay. Well, all's well that ends well. But before we get to the end, let's even talk about the effect on the average Nigerian. We've been talking about numbers. We've been postulating how things are looking upward. But truth be heard, does all this growth that we've been talking about, does it translate to the ordinary Nigerian? Is the ordinary Nigerian able to see it, feel it, and say, okay, we've been talking about growth in all sectors, and we see it.
Okay, so can we translate it to the average Nigerian? In all honesty, the answer is no. The answer
Ouch.
is no. That's a very clear, honest answer. But then it is not. It's sort of like a gray area because right, we are seeing the GDP overall last year we did 3.87%, and this is not able to match what the population is doing, right? So for us to be able to see this translate generally to the entire population, it means that we have to be able to grow up beyond the population growth rate, right? So, and we see that because inflation is still a bit on the high side, so purchasing power has actually been eroded over the years, right? Over the years, so the value of the naira has actually, the purchasing power has actually been eroded. So we have to, I would say we still have a little bit of a time or long time to actually recover those lost ground. So when we recover those lost ground, we cannot see these
Quite a
data
gray areas.
translating, yes, translating to the average Nigerian. But before we get there, it's still
We
a
need to
bit of a
put
muddy
things in.
water. Yes.
We need to
So
put things in place.
we need to see this GDP growing maybe faster than this, or maybe at this pace. We can see it
Mm,
maybe at the 6 levels, 7 levels, then 7%, 6% levels, and we can now say, okay, yeah, we are out of the water at this time. And so we can start
mm.
translating it into the average cities in the average Nigeria.
Finally, I need you to answer this in a minute or less because we're almost out of time. And that
Oh,
is the trade, this whole war between US and Iran. Well, it's not originally US and Iran, but
mm.
looking at the attacks, US attacking Iran, and so far so good. The oil prices are climbing. Is it all good and all clear for Nigeria, or is there a downward side to this?
It's a bit of the two, if you ask me, right? It's a bit of the two. The oil prices climbing up means that, sorry, oil prices climbing up simply means that if we are able to ramp up our production in oil, right,
Mm-hmm.
because we recorded 1.58 million barrel per day in Q4 2020, 5 in Q3 2025, we were able to do 1.64. So if you're able to even wrap up to above 1.6 levels, then we can see that this can actually translate because we sell more oil for a higher price, right? And so we get more revenue from there. But the downside to this is that if this if the price of oil goes up, definitely because the way Nigeria oil sectors, the way it's structured at the moment, you might see that translating into the prices of fuel and diesel. And so this can actually now increase the cost that we have to pay for this fuel and diesel. And so we can see that it might now feed into prices of agricultural produce, prices of manufacturing, prices of industrial, prices of even telecommunications and everything. So this will feed into a cost for us. And at the same time, as we are getting more revenue, we are also losing more revenue from the
Wow.
citizens. So this is also sort of like a bit of the two, right? So, but yeah, it's kind of mixed. If you ask me, it's kind of mixed, and so I think we might see that, but I'm not so certain.
Okay. Well, mixed situation when if you are looking into that. Well, that's the much we can take today on Marketplace. Thank you so much for, making sense of the digits, making sense of all the market analysis. It's been a great conversation. So for anyone who's listening now and needs further analysis, possibly they need more insight into what it is for those who are trying to diversify their portfolio, that is, and get their feet wet. How can they reach out to you on your social media handles?
Okay, they can reach out to our company, my company, social media. We are on LinkedIn, Alpha10 Group. We are on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Alpha10 Group. So you can drop a message. They'll relate it to us, the team. Then we can provide answers to those questions.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Osamagbe Enofe, for all that insight. It's been really, really helpful. Lagos, as you know, marketplace comes your way Monday at 5:15, and it's always insight into what's happening in the economy. There's still much more music lined up for you immediately after the squig breather. I've got Justin Timberlake. Yes, I know you possibly have removed the suit and tie and you're just coasting home. Hence the music for you. So you know that it is here. Smooth 98.1. We got you covered. Thank you so much. It was definitely
All
an
right.
insightful conversation.